Hey folks, this is your complete GoPro Hero 13 Black user guide, beginner's guide, the complete guide, whatever you want to call it. In this video, I'm going to walk through everything you need to know about the Hero 13 Black from someone who's been using GoPro action cameras for well over a decade at this point. I'm going to walk through all the features on this, both the existing features as well as the new features. If you want my review about how those features work, like good or bad, that's up in the corner there. Instead, this guide is all about explaining to you how to use this camera, again, with tons and tons of pro tips. And given such a big part of the Hero 13 Black is all the new accessories for it, like the new lenses and things like that, I'm going to walk through all of those, but also, probably more importantly, I'm going to walk through all the accessories that I actually use day in and day out with GoPro cameras, and talk about which ones you might want to spend money on the GoPro branded ones versus which ones just go and buy anything else cheap on Amazon. So with that, I'll just simply dive into what's in the box. So this is everything that comes in the base GoPro Hero 13 Black box. Keeping in mind, GoPro has like 20 different combinations for the Hero 13 Black in terms of different accessories based on what sports you might be doing, including a lot of the accessories I just talked about. You've got a USB-C to USB-C cable, nothing too special there. You've got a GoPro Enduro battery. This is their newest Enduro battery, and this one basically has a longer battery life than the existing Enduro battery. Previously, it was like a white color battery, now it's black. You can see this chart right here showing the difference in runtimes between the previous one and the current one. This is with airflow. We'll talk about non-airflow settings a little bit later on. Then you've got a thumb screw, and you've got basically a sticky mount. This goes onto a helmet or something like that and allows you to slide in this portion right here like that. You basically just lift up the rubber part, you snap it in, and then it's locked. And now one quick note about these little sticky mounts right here is that you can buy like a pack of 20 or 30 of these on Amazon for like 10 bucks. So don't worry about these. Both flat ones, like this is a curved one, so it doesn't really fit very well on a flat surface. There's a gap there, which isn't good for high speed stuff. Flat ones as well as curved ones, massive packs on Amazon for super cheap, and just use whatever you want. And then from there, you have the camera and then a thumb screw. So look at the bottom of the camera first, and we'll get to like putting the battery in just a second. And this is GoPro's updated mount system. So you have your existing kind of standard issue GoPro finger mount that you have right there. So what this allows you to do is take the GoPro standard mount system like you see right here, and then just simply slide it in. And then from there, you put in the thumb screw like this and tighten it up. Keep in mind, by the way, there is a Phillips head option in there. So if you really want to crank something down and you want to make sure it never ever moves, you can do that. If you look, you flip it back down again, there is in the middle there a little quarter 20 screw, basically for a tripod screw. So if you put this on any sort of tripod you want to. But the last piece here is their new magnetic mount. So if I look over into my pile of new accessories over here, you've got this little magnetic mount. And what this is, it has a standard GoPro adapter on the bottom, but here it's got magnets that latch in place. So I just simply pop it in like this, and then it's nice and secure. To release it, I pull it out like that. I can flip it over, do the exact same thing, and then release it and pull it out. The idea behind this is it makes it quicker and easier to move cameras between different mounts. Both the DJI as well as Insta360 had mounts similar to this in the past. There were some differences I go to in my full review, but I would say this is a slightly improved version of what they had. That said, GoPro recommends, and I would agree with this, that for high speed, high vibration applications, you use the native mounting fingers with a GoPro mount as opposed to using a magnetic latch. Okay, so let's look inside of the camera and get the battery in there. This is the battery door right here. The way you open it is basically just kind of push down on this little bit and it pops open. Now, don't worry if this battery door falls off. That is not a problem. It's designed to be removed because you can put on other battery doors. For example, we'll talk about later on the new Contact battery charging door called Contacto. Basically, you can charge it through the battery door and have this whole thing be waterproof. That there, same thing, you just simply do that and then rip it off again. Inside, what you see here is where the SD card goes, as well as the battery. Now, from an SD card standpoint, it is probably the most important choice you're going to make on this GoPro from an accessories perspective. If you have a bad SD card, your GoPro is going to freeze up. It's going to do all sorts of wonky stuff. This is the card. I'll put a link in the description here. These are the cards that I've been using for years. I used both the 256 and the 512 versions, and then previous to that, the 128 versions. I find 256 is generally a good kind of middle ground there, where I don't have to constantly worry about swapping out to SD cards, but I have been shifting some things to 512, especially on some of my higher end drones zones where they're just producing a lot more data. Just a quick note, if you could either watch this video all the way through, or at the very least hit the like or subscribe button, that would really, really help out. The YouTube gods really want you to watch the whole video all the way through. That tells YouTube that you like the video, and then it recommends it to other people, which really helps me out quite a bit. So let's go ahead and put an SD card in there. And this one is what I've been using, so you better see some of the footage on it a little bit later on. Just simply slide it in, pop it in like that. And then you've got the battery we already talked about. Just pop that in as well. There we go. And then we take the door and snap that on. And you can see the little light popped on there a second ago. On the side here is the mode button to power it on, and on top is the recording button. This little thing right here, that is not a door. Please do not try to remove that. One of the microphones is underneath that, and if you remove that, that'll kill that microphone. So don't do that. The door is on this side, one-sided door. So powering it on here, pressing this left-hand button there for a second, it'll turn it on. There we go. We got the chirps. And then it'll turn on and get into the first setup guide. Now at this point, we can choose a language. I'm gonna go with English. And then we choose some legal stuff, literally legal stuff. I agree to that. Now, the Hero 13 Black brings back GPS into this device. The point of GPS in a GoPro is to be able to do speed overlays and other data metric overlays. So it's recording that information, and in the GoPro app, you can go ahead and basically just overlay that onto your video. It's not as detailed as some of GoPro's competitors, most notably Insta360 in this area, but it's great that they stuck it back in the camera after yanking it out from the Hero 12 Black. Hit that. Oops, there we go. On. Voice control, we'll leave as on. We'll get into voice control a little bit later on. Voice control language, obviously English in this case. And then we go to setting up the GoPro app. So I've got my phone here. I'm going to walk you through how we set that up. And then once you have the app installed, we'll actually see this right away. But in my case, I'm just going to go ahead and manually walk you through how to do it. Tap GoPro in the lower right-hand corner. In the upper right-hand corner, you will tap the plus icon. And it's going to say, hey, we found a new GoPro. Simple as that. Connect the camera. And then you'll see basically it'll update Bluetooth pairing request. Yep, click pair. And then over on the camera itself, you can see you're done. It's as simple as that. Now I'm gonna save the name as Hero 13 Black. I'm good with that. There we go. You can change the name to whatever you want if you have multiple GoPro cameras, for example, GoPro 1, 2, 3, etc. And then it's going to ask if you want to search for Wi-Fi networks. And the reason you want to do that is if you have the GoPro subscription, which allows you to upload all of your footage in its native and original formats, resolutions, etc. to the GoPro cloud, then this will go ahead and basically do that anytime you plug the camera into Wi-Fi. So I'm going to choose that right here. I'm going to go with the cave guest. That way I don't type in a longer password. At this point, I'll go ahead and connect to Wi-Fi and validate everything is good to go and set that on the camera. And again, anytime you plug in the camera, it'll automatically upload your footage. You can add multiple Wi-Fi networks as well. So here I am at the office. I can do the same at home. At that point, I am ready. There's an option here for whether or not you want to free up the SD card by removing the stuff after it uploads. In my case, I choose not to do that because I want to access those files on the camera more quickly, but you could enable that. I wouldn't recommend it. I just would recommend having a bigger SD card or extra SD cards. I'm all done. I'll click all done. At this point, we'll click let's go, and we are ready to go back to the camera. Now, as I mentioned earlier on, I put a used SD card in there so you can see some of that footage. That's why you see at the top there, I've still got 3 hours left, but not the full SD card. And the battery up here at the top right shows 92%. This is in basically the basic mode for the GoPro. We'll switch over to Pro mode, which is what most GoPros used to be up till a few years ago, and what I would recommend across the board for changing settings. You'll be a pro by the end of this particular video. But these are basically the different options here. If we tap on the 1x right there, this is basically talking about the frames per second that you're recording. So generally speaking, most videos record at, for example, 30 frames per second. But high-speed video, where you want to play that back in slow motion, might be recorded at 120 frames per second or 240 frames per second, etc. And so instead of just playing back at 30 frames per second, you take that 120 frames per second and slow it down. So that means you get basically 4 times the length there. Now, in this case, you can see as I slide up this, I can choose 2x at 60 frames, 4x, or all the way up to 8x at 240 frames per second. You'll have noted, by the way, though, that it did change the resolution there. So down here, it's at 4K, 4K, and then up there at 240 frames per second, it goes down to 2.7K. That's because as you record faster frames, you have to reduce the resolution because the processing can't keep up. And this is true of all action cameras. We'll just go back here right now to 4K 30. Below that, you have your digital lens. Think of your digital lens just like a real-world lens, that you have wide lenses and narrow lenses and things like that. So on the GoPro, the default is wide, which has a slight fisheye effect, but not as bad as other different scenarios. And fisheye isn't bad. People like to diss on fisheye, but fisheye is what lets you put a camera this close to you and get your entire body while you're skiing, right? It's not a bad thing. It's no different than any other ultra-wide lens that you'd find on a normal camera like the ones above me or the one out right there. So there are essentially 5 different core kind of lenses, if you will, on a GoPro. But if you want to get rid of that fisheye look, you go into the linear mode right there, oops, in the middle there, linear. Linear means that it just simply has a very flat look. So look at the board right there across, it is perfectly straight across that. Versus if I go to wide, you'll see that slight bit of, kind of rounding there, fisheye. And then if I go to super view, which is the next step up in there, you're going to see a much wider field of view out here. But again, still a bit of that curvature to it, the fisheye look. And then if I go all the way up to hyper view at now 12 millimeter equivalency, you can see even more of the kind of studio behind me, or in front of me, I guess. But again, a bit more of that fisheye look. Now, one of the tricks though is if you were to go ahead and just keep things level, the fisheye goes away. So there's a point there where the horizon is perfectly level and the fisheye effect will largely go away on that horizon plane. So just keep that in mind when you're filming to find that exact kind of point there. Now, if you go the opposite direction, so we went to linear that we showed a minute ago, right there, okay? And then below that is linear plus horizon lock. And what that means is as I rotate the camera, the horizon will stay the exact same. So to demonstrate that, I've got to hit record real quick right there. And then watch as I rotate the camera, and I'll put the footage up here to show you what this looks like. So I am rotating the camera, but the footage that you're seeing is perfectly flat in the camera. So essentially what it's doing is it's going ahead and taking the big sensor size that it has there, cropping into it, and then essentially accounting for your rotation within that and keeping that flat. It's useful in certain scenarios, and in other cases you don't necessarily want it. For example, when I'm mountain biking, I don't want that horizon lock because it removes the kind of that feeling of the motion going around the curves and things like that. The other times, if you have the camera like on a dashboard or something inside a car and you can't quite get it level because of just whatever kind of scenario is going on inside of how you mounted it, horizon lock is super useful for that because again, it kind of makes it all nice and level and just ensures that it's a perfectly set image. The vast majority of the time I'm on either wide or super view because I like the look of the GoPro being that kind of slightly wider perspective. That's why I have a GoPro, is to get me in the frame while I'm doing a selfie like this or whatever the case is, but there are times where I use linear. Over here on the right hand side is quality. Now again, this is the beginner's side of the GoPro. This is really just changing your resolution. So you can see down the bottom, there's 1080p, the middle is 4K, and the upper side is 5.3K. Now, keep in mind with resolution, these sound like minor bumps from 4K to 5.3K. That's a huge bump in resolution. The same goes from 1080p to 4K. Massive, massive bumps in resolution. As a general rule, I'm leaving it on 5.3K. I want that resolution to be able to crop into, so if I've got it, especially because it's a wider lens than a GoPro, where I've got an entire picture, and I'm like, you know what, I actually just want this little section in the middle here. If I was only shooting a 4K, then that would look more blurry when I cropped into that. So by shooting a 5K, I've got all the resolution to crop into that. And again, SD cards, micro SD cards are super cheap. Just go with the big one and you won't worry about it. So we got that at 5.3K. Up on the right hand side right there, this is your framing. So basically, do you want widescreen or horizontal? Do you want it to be vertical? So basically Instagram stories, Snapchat, TikTok, or back to the top, there we go. Do you want full frame? And what this is doing basically a giant square of the full sensor size, and then you can crop into that. Here's an example of this with my daughter, where I shot it as the full frame 1x1 sensor, and then I simply cropped into it once for horizontal, and then once for vertical, and then back to the entire sensor side. And here's a quick explainer that GoPro has on their site to show you how you can crop that full frame side into whatever particular set that you want. So essentially, if you don't know whether you're gonna use it for a vertical video or horizontal video or photo, then if you shoot full frame, you can kind of decide later on, to a certain extent anyways. I'm gonna go back to widescreen because that's what I normally shoot. Now, swiping down from the top right there, you've got a bunch of different settings. Most of these are relatively self-explanatory. Right here, you can turn on and off voice control. Here, you can change the beeps. Note, you can change the beep volume from low, medium, high in the settings, deeper in the settings. And then down here, this controls what happens on the front display. So I haven't talked about the front display yet, but there is a front display. And what this allows you to do is to either turn it off entirely, have it be status only. So basically just showing you, for example, how many minutes are left in your SD card and stuff like that. If I do this right there for actual screen, then I turn it around, you'll see the status is displayed at the top there, and I'm displayed in the middle. This is the entire 16:9 frame, horizontal frame, and then the mode at the bottom, battery status. Versus if I were to go ahead into full screen there, turn it around, you'll see it's cropped in, so basically just that middle square. I don't like this because I don't really know what I'm actually filming very well. This helps me by going back the other way. I can see my entire framing and see exactly how things are framed. It's also important to note, by the way, that on the GoPro, this is always displayed in every single frame rate. That's not the case with something like the DJI Action 4, which turns off the display in the higher frame rates. So there is one difference here that people often talk about, the fact that the Action 4 has a touchscreen in the front. This isn't touch, this is just non-touch. There's no interaction with that. Certainly I would like this to be touch, that would be great. But it's not, I've never really had a reason to touch this. I'm always just turning around, and I guess that's just habit. I'd much rather have the ability to see what's on the screen than not be able to see what's on the screen when I'm recording in 4K 60 or higher resolutions. So going back to settings right here, this option right there lets you lock the orientation. The reason is that normally when you turn the camera like this, it goes into vertical mode, but you might not want that. You might still want to be able to record in the 16:9, the horizontal layout. That just simply locks that orientation. Otherwise, if we turn it off here, you can see that when I turn it this way, it's now recording in that vertical mode. And then down on the right-hand side, we can get into lenses. We'll talk about that in just a moment when we get into the accessories. Up here, you've got the ability to lock the screen automatically. It's somewhat useful if you have a lot of like rain or water going on where you just don't want the screen to do weird stuff. I generally don't have that problem, to be honest. I usually just use it unlocked. I don't like the lock screen because I'm constantly having to unlock it. So for the lock screen there, basically, in order to access it, you have to swipe to unlock like that, which is not a big deal. It's just not what I prefer all the time. So I just leave it unlocked. Now, swiping over here, you have the additional settings and preferences that I talked about earlier on. Most of this is just kind of deeper settings like changing connectivity options, wireless networks, turning on and off GPS, changing the language for your voice control, changing the camera volume from high, medium, low. I prefer low, to be honest. High is just pretty loud, especially if you're in indoor settings. If I click back here though, I've got the Quik app that's paired, that's the GoPro Quik app on my phone, and then I have the controls in easy mode. Before we change this option, let me show you two more things. Go over here and you can see the amount of my SD card, so I can start the upload right now to GoPro, the cloud. I can see how much of my SD card I've used up, so 184 at 256 gigs. I can see how much is not uploaded right now versus how much is uploaded. That's useful in case you're trying to clear out something and don't know what's been cleared. But you can actually see that on the video files themselves. So if I just simply swipe up, this accesses all my past, there we go. This accesses all my past videos on the camera. I tap that little grid in the upper left-hand corner, and now I can go ahead and see all of the past photos that I have, or all the past videos, sorry, that I've shot on the camera. So lots of stuff on there. It's gonna pull those all up. I've shot a bunch of stuff. Sometimes I'm just shooting like shots that are kind of boring comparison shots and whatnot. But then there's a lot of cool action stuff and whatnot that I have depending on what I'm filming that particular day. So if you look on this one right there, you see that little cloud icon in the middle? It's kind of hard to see, I know, but if you look, you see a little cloud icon with a checkbox. That means it's been uploaded to the GoPro cloud. And of course, I can tap on anything here like this, and I can play it if I want to.
This is the ND4 Super View 5.6K.
Down the bottom, I can scrub across this video. I can say, oh, let me find the cool part, and maybe that's the cool part right there. I can change the speed over here, so I can turn the slow-mo on, and now it's in slow-mo, and I'm seeing that in all of its glory right there. There we go, turn that back off again. Come on. And again, the audio that I showed you earlier, and I can hit the trash can to get rid of that. But this is an awesome shot. I'm not gonna get rid of that. So that is how you access. Again, you just simply swipe up from the bottom there. That's how you access that. To change between the three core modes, which are video, time lapse, and time warpy stuff, as well as photo, you can either use the mode button on the side. There we go. Just to go through them: photo, time lapse, and then video. Or you can just simply swipe to the right, just like that. And you can see those are the three modes there. There you go, pretty straightforward. We're gonna go back into video. And as I showed earlier on, to start a recording, you just simply hit that top button like that, and now it's recording. At the top, you see the recording timer, again, the battery, and the SD card status. If you wanna mark a highlight, like say something really cool happens, just simply hit this side button like that, and now a highlight is added, and that tells both you in the video afterwards, you can look and see where those highlights are, but also tells the GoPro Quik app when it's making its compilations at the end of the day that the cool thing happened right there. So to stop it, you just simply hit that top button right there. You can also use the GoPro voice commands. GoPro, start recording. There we go, starts recording. GoPro, stop recording. You can, again, there's different voice commands. You can find them listed on GoPro's site. I use it sparingly, not that often to be honest. I often tend to turn it off until I have a reason to use it because I don't want a scenario where the camera thinks it hears something and stops the recording. So I'm only turning it on when I have a very specific scenario where I need to turn it on. Otherwise, I'm just simply turning it off by swiping down, and then turning it off there. Just so again, it doesn't accidentally stop recording somewhere. I'm having a conversation with someone while I'm riding a bike, and then the GoPro thinks that I was talking to it, turns off the recording, I don't realize it, and you get the point. So let's get out of basic mode. You've graduated at this point. So we're back here. We're just gonna go from controls, easy, up to pro. Don't be intimidated, this is not that complex. This is the version it's been in the vast majority of GoPro's life. The easy modes are kind of a newer thing here. And as you can see, it looks very, very similar. At the bottom here though, we have our video presets. These are essentially presets that you can create, and we'll walk through one right now, that you can quickly switch back and forth between. If I just tap create new preset at the bottom, I can choose the type. Now this is a video preset. There are separate presets for photos and separate presets for time-lapse and time warp. So I have video, burst, slow mode, or looping. We're gonna go to video, there we go. So starting at the top here, there is a standard mode, HDR in log. Standard is what you're gonna use most of the time. HDR if you want high dynamic range, a bit more colors to that. And then log if you're planning to edit that deeply in some sort of video editing program afterwards. If you don't know what log is, don't choose it. If you know what log is and you know what you're doing and you know how much work you're gonna have to invest to make that stuff look good later on. 16:9, basically your framing options, 16:9, vertical, 4:3 is a little bit taller version of 16:9, and 8:7 is almost that complete square to work within to kind of crop like I talked about earlier and basically choosing what you want later on. Resolution, I choose 5K across the board. And the frame rate, I choose 50 frames per second or 60 frames per second, depending on whether or not I'm in NTSC or PAL. And then the lens, I prefer super view there, but by default it's on wide. Hyper smooth is on. Down below, some different capture scheduling options. So you'd be able to do a schedule capture to say, start the camera at 5 in the morning. Duration limit, say, you know what, only record for an hour though at 5 in the morning. Hindsight, what hindsight allows you to do is to effectively have TiVo for your camera, but it burns a lot of battery. What it does though, let's say you were trying to shoot a basketball across the court, but like all the way across the court. And you know that's gonna take a lot of attempts. Hindsight means you can put the camera up there and turn it on. It's going to effectively record continuously, but only save the last buffer percentage. So only save the last 15 seconds to 30 seconds. So the way it works is that when you get to that shot going in, then you press the record button on the camera and boom, it's got the last 30 seconds of footage. But it doesn't waste all of your storage space with the previous hour or however long it is. But there's lots of scenarios where you just don't want to waste all that footage on there. It does not save battery though, because it's still effectively recording that temporarily to a buffer. Timer is to go ahead and basically say, hey, wait 3 seconds before you start recording, or 10 seconds. And then Pro Tune options, you can change your bit depth to 10 bit to get a bit more color depth out of that. Bit rate, you can go up to high. And again, these burn more battery and take up more SD card space. And then you have your standard kind of pro setting options for EV comp to make it brighter or darker, for example, white balance, shutter speed, etc. Last but not least on audio tuning is a new option on the Hero 13 to have kind of a voiced focused one versus a standard tuning. I've been totally fine with the standard tuning, but there may be certain like really busy like New York Times Square scenarios where you might want to switch over to voice tuning. Wind reduction, just leave that on auto, trust me. With that, you can change the shortcuts that are displayed on the screen as well, those little dots that are on the screen, the circles, you can change those. You can name your preset. This is new here where you can give it a custom name if you want to. So I'm going to create a custom name here, and then I can type that in. I can say, there we go, and I'm good to go. And I also could have changed the icon back there as well. At this point, those are my settings. Now you can tap this, and you can see it's now one of my new modes there that I can quickly switch back and forth between. And speaking of which, a quick tip on this. Let's say you're in the water and you can't really use a touchscreen because it's not working that well. You can always change between modes by pressing both the mode and the top button together. So just like this. And now you'll pop this up and you can just iterate between those and choose what you want. Say I want to go to burst slow mode. which is a good time to talk about the new burst slow-mo mode. So this mode here, I can choose a settings option right there to get into it, or by the way, you can always long hold in the middle, and that brings you the same option. This has essentially three options here. 5.3K at 120 frames per second, 900p, so like not quite 1080p, at 360 frames per second, or 720p at 400 frames per second, and only in these three digital lenses. Wide for that one, linear for this one, or narrow for this one. Narrow is take linear, but even more narrow, as the name describes. But most importantly, what you'll see here, you only get 5 seconds worth in this 5.3K at 120 frames per second because the processing demands are so high. So the idea here with slow-mo is, again, if you want to capture like a cannonball, like this shot right here is shot in 5.3K in that 5 seconds that I've got, 120 frames per second. So when you hit the record out there, you'll see that 5 second basically display at the top as well as the timer against that, and then it processes that after the fact. Now the other modes have different times because the processing allows that at effectively a lower resolution. So 360 frames per second or 400 frames per second. If I tap that, I go back, you can see this gives me 15 seconds worth as opposed to only the 5 seconds worth. But the downside is you're only shooting a 720p, which isn't super great from a resolution standpoint. If you don't have a lot of detail in the image, then it's probably fine. Like just say, someone flying through a blue sky briefly. But if you got a lot of detail in the shot, it's not going to come out super well. So I would use these sparingly and use the other normal slow-mo modes instead. So for example, if we were to go here and I just choose video, you can make this your own slow-mo mode at any point in time by just simply saying, you know what, I want 4K at 120 frames per second. There you go. That's slow-mo. That's straight up slow-mo right there. 120 frames per second means you can slow that down 4 times, be 4 times slower without any obvious degradation to that video. So let's talk briefly about time-lapse and time-warp modes. I'm just going to press mode here to get out of this. I'm going to swipe over like this to time-lapse. And now time-lapse is effectively a whole category of things, including, if I tap into this, time warp, star trails, light painting, vehicle lights, time lapse, night lapse, and so on. Essentially, all the things where you're going to keep your camera on for a long period of time. So it's super important to understand the difference between time warp and time lapse. Time lapse is when the camera is not going to move anywhere, but the world moves around it. So time lapse is great for you want to put it in a window and watch the clouds go by. That's good for time lapse. But it is not good if you want to put the camera in a car dashboard. That is time warp. And the reason is that time-lapse doesn't have any stabilization. It is essentially taking photos one after another and just putting those back to back together, which looks totally fine when you have, again, in a building and the clouds going by, because you don't need stabilization there at all. Nothing's moving. But when something's moving, you want to have that stabilization, otherwise it just looks horrendous. Time warp instead is applying that stabilization and making things buttery smooth. You can see an example here of a time warp in a car that I did. It looks incredibly smooth. It looks like the world's just flying by. So that's where you want to use time warp. So again, simple rule of thumb, if the camera is moving somewhere, use time warp. If the camera is staying put, use time lapse. And within that, I can choose the options for time warp, for example, just like normal at the top there. But down here, the important one is speed. So I usually just choose auto. It always works out. But you can change how often it takes a recording. So you can see right there at 10x, it means that 5 minutes of video will create about 30 seconds of time warp. So it depends on how far you're going. Here, 30x speed, 15 minutes of recording, it creates about 10 seconds of time warp video. Meanwhile, going back here to time lapse, there we go, time lapse and night lapse. Pretty self-explanatory which one you want to use for which one there. It's going to adjust essentially the exposure rates and stuff to optimize for being light out or dark out. If I go down to the bottom here, you can see the interval. How often do I want to take a picture? Every half a second, all the way up to every hour. Again, depending on what you want to record. If you're doing something for a few hours, I always go with the most, half a second, right? But if you're going for days with a battery bank or whatever, then certainly go up to some other interval that makes sense. But my favorite ones are actually star trails and vehicle lights. In light painting, but I don't have that much creativity. So star trails is this right here that you're seeing. And this is just shot in my backyard in the middle of Amsterdam. So tons of light pollution and obviously clouds went by and stuff like that. But it lets you get epic sort of star trail type things in the right settings, especially in the mountains or just anywhere away from light pollution. All you do is go into this option and then point it at the sky, put it on a tripod of some sort, something stable, right? So it's not moving, especially with wind. You don't want any wind. So really, like, to put it on the ground like this is honestly your best bet. Like, that's your best scenario. Hit the record button and walk away. Ideally with a battery bank of some sort if you want to record overnight. I typically record overnight because clouds might come in and stuff like that and disturb it. So my best shot is to record the entire night and then take out the snippet that I want. Super cool stuff. Vehicle lights here can be used in two scenarios. One, you can put a stationary camera on a bridge or whatever the case is and watch the cars go by and it looks super cool. Or two, you can be in the car like you see right here and you get that same sort of streaking effect going by. Really great like alternative to a time warp while you're moving. And then last but not least, light painting is when you have a dark surface and then you basically just paint with light. You can use your phone, like use different color screens on your phone. In other words, just put a bright red square on your phone and you can use your phone to do the same thing, or whatever the case is, you can use flashlights and stuff like that to paint in light in the darkness. So really simple, kind of really cool, fun modes to use. So let's swap over to photo modes now. There we go, into photo modes. And then you've got effectively the same style of stuff here. So you've got regular photo, burst, and night photo. If I tap into this right here, I can change my digital lens. Do I want linear? Do I want wide? Again, linear means it's gonna get rid of that fisheye look, so you might want that for some photo stuff. Output here, do I want super photo, HDR, standard or raw? Super photo is going to give you basically the best colors across the board. I'm almost always using super photo. I virtually never use HDR and never standard. If I'm going to do something, I'm going to use raw at the other end of the spectrum, giving me both a JPEG as well as a raw photo that I can tweak in things like Lightroom or whatever you want. But I find super photo gives me the best across the board. Otherwise, you got the same kind of standard capture options there, as well as some of the pro photo options that you would expect down there if you want to tweak some of that stuff. Going back here into this real quick, a burst is if you want to take a whole bunch of photos at the same time, right? So burst right there is auto, but I can go up to 60 photos in 10 seconds, or right here is 30 photos over 3 seconds, 30 over 1 second is the most that you have, right? And these are taken actual high resolution photos. But don't do this. I mean this in the nicest possible way. Don't do this unless you really, really, really need the photo. Otherwise, shoot a video. Shoot a 5.3K video in 60 frames per second, and you've got double this rate right here at 5.3K. I'll put the exact resolutions on the screen here at the end, the effective resolutions. 5.3K though is a lot of megapixels. It is not the full megapixels of the entire sensor though if you were shooting a photo, and it wouldn't have RAW mode. And the thing to keep in mind is the vast majority of stills on GoPros today are not with the photo mode now. They're with video mode, and where you put the camera there, you record a video, and in the GoPro app you simply take the still that you want, because that's a really easy function to do that, to take the exact frame that you want, the exact epic moment that you wanted, the exact frame, take that, as opposed to trying to get the exact frame in a photo in a burst, which is incredibly difficult to do. Almost everyone I know now will use basically video mode as opposed to photo mode to do that. But if you want to, the burst mode is still there. Now, a quick note about overheating. This is something that a lot of people talk about, but isn't really as big of a deal as you think. Overheating means that basically a camera form factor that's small has to dissipate as much heat as possible. And the Hero 13 changes notably from the Hero 12, and that it's got this heat sink on the front right there to try to dissipate heat. Also, by the way, these are the exact same exterior dimensions of a camera, so they do fit across the board. Everything like fits from an accessory standpoint. There we go. But that heatsink gives you much better heat dissipation. And heat dissipation only really matters in low airflow, no airflow scenarios. So for example, leaving the camera right here indoors, there's no airflow. This camera is going to start to slowly heat like a lobster in a pot, and eventually it'll overheat itself. If you're outside though and moving on a bike or even running, etc., there is virtually no scenario you will overheat a GoPro, not just the 13, but any of the recent generation ones. I've done so much testing on this, massive amounts of testing on this, and as long as you have some amount of airflow, by the way, water counts as airflow in this case, in terms of a cooling effect, water is like the best possible scenario, it will not overheat, period. However, in the scenario where you have it like in a car dashboard, in the sun and there's no airflow, or inside filming, then overheating can be an issue, mainly in higher frame rates at higher resolution. For example, 5.3K, 30 frames per second, 4K, 60 frames per second and above. You generally won't get it at 1080p, at 30 frames per second or stuff like that. It's really those higher resolutions. I've done testing on this with this compared to other cameras. Here's a little snippet on that right now. I'm kind of building out my testing for all the Hero 13 stuff against other cameras. But the thing is, you shouldn't have to worry about it too much, because ultimately, as long as you're moving somewhere, you're fine. And if you're not moving somewhere, then just step down the frames per second. For example, in a car dashboard, go down to like 4K 30 and you should be totally fine. Okay, so let's now talk about some of the new Hero 13 Black accessories, because those are kind of the star of the show if you're in that realm. Keeping in mind, I got my full review video up in the corner where I talk about like the good and the bad of that. I just want to briefly walk through these accessories and how you use them, just in case you get one of them. So looking at these accessories here, I'm going to start with the ones that are the easiest to do first and kind of go in complexity from there. Let's go with the battery contact door here. Really straightforward. This is the contact door there, and all it's really doing is it has battery contact points there and a USB port right there, and it's replacing this door on the side. So if I rip this off and I put this on in place, you'll see it's just going to go into that battery. It's just going to go in that USB port hole right there and lock it in place, right? Straightforward. Then you've got two different cables, a shorter one and a longer one. This is the shorter one because I kept my desk a little bit cleaner right now. And it magnetically attaches. So you can see right there, easy, magnetically attaches, right? Then I've got my battery bank over here, and I just simply plug it in. And when I do that, you'll see it's got the battery indicator indicating it's now charging. In a couple seconds, the GoPro will go ahead and say, hey, do you want to start uploading to the GoPro cloud? I'm saying, no, that's not the time for that right now. It's as simple as that, right? Easy peasy. That's all you do. It's awesome because I just leave this on almost the entire time. The only time I don't leave it on is it doesn't technically fit in the dive case. This little notch right there is just a little bit too wide. It doesn't fit in here. So I leave it on the whole time. If, by the way, pro tip, you go diving and you're like, I only just have this with me. That's the only thing I brought because I just normally use this day to day. Not the end of the world. Take the camera off. Before you put it in the case there, stuff some little pieces of paper there, right? All you gotta do is keep the battery from moving in a dive case. You don't have to worry about waterproofing. Just ball up some paper, stuff it in there, you're totally fine. That's all you need to do. Just give you that quick tip now so that when that happens to you, not a big deal at all. So putting that over there. This is awesome. It's just so easy to use now versus in the past you had to have a pass-through door, which was not waterproof, which was fine, but then you would like go to the beach or the pool, whatever, jump in there and realize that you just killed your GoPro. This is totally waterproof down to 10 meters, about 30 feet or so. No problems. Also no problems in the rain. I did a lot of like night shooting outside with the battery bank somewhat protected. And then this part here was exposed entirely. So there is that. Put this over here out of the way. Let's see. There is a new GoPro battery charging thing, 2 seconds on this. You basically charge two batteries in there. So you put one in like this, put the other one there, USB cord there. It's slightly faster than the internal charging. Both of them are bat crap slow compared to their competitors. It's the single biggest criticism I actually have on GoPro is it is painfully slow compared to their competitors, which get to 80% in 20 minutes, and GoPro, as you can see by my testing charts right here, is way slower than that. Anyways, there's that. Next up, we have the magnetic mount. I already showed you this earlier, but there is also a version with a ball joint. This is so awesome. So this right here means that you can still snap it in place like this, but you can easily adjust what you want. So you use the bottom part here to go into any different GoPro accessories we'll talk about later on, like this, snaps in, and you can easily move it around. So I do recommend that. But let's talk about lenses. See, I told you that was the quick and easy part. Here we have the macro lens. So what we're gonna do is we're first gonna remove this detachable, removable lens in the front here. The last few years of GoPro has been like this. All you do is simply kind of press in and rotate. Usually you do it wrong one way. Move this out of the way. All you do is simply press in like this and kind of rotate. It's a little bit tricky the first few times to do it, but that is the removable lens. So if you get this scratched, you can replace this, no big deal at all. Also, by the way, quick tip, this has a hydrophobic coating on it to repel water, so it kind of just like bubbles right off. That means you don't need to lick your GoPro lens anymore. In fact, by licking your GoPro lens, it has the opposite effect and it'll cause the liquid, the fluids, the water, to go ahead and stick to the lens. So don't lick your lens anymore. Just leave it as is. In any case, got that out of the way. And then here is the macro lens. So it comes in this little carrying case. And then you see those two little blue dots. I'm going to simply line those up like this. And then I will find the point where it snaps in, and I will rotate the whole thing like that, and then pull off the cover. And that is the macro lens. Now, the whole point of the macro lens is for really close-up shots. It's got a 4-inch or 11-centimeter minimum focusing distance compared to much further away for a normal GoPro lens. So you can get shots like this where I've got on my bike and I'm just cruising along. So that allows you to get shots like this, which are incredibly cool, and even do that at 120 frames per second, slow-mo, all that kind of stuff. It's amazing, it's super, super cool, by far the coolest lens that you've got here. So you can see immediately it knows what lens it is. So it detects the macro lens at the top there and shows that. If for some reason it doesn't, so one of the ND filters, I broke off the little blue tab, so I don't know which way is up and down, and so it'll only auto-detect the ND filter the correct way. Then all you do is swipe down here, tap into the lens option. You can see it's on auto-detect. This is actually how you'd use the older Max Lens Mod, because it doesn't have an auto-detect option. There you go, choose that there, or choose whatever lens you want. I just leave it on auto-detect because it just works beautifully. That's new on the Hero 13 Black. So on macro right now, you can use the macro focusing ring. Thank you, GoPro, for walking through the thing automatically. And this is the focusing ring up here in the top. So this right there lets you rotate it to focus on different things. But what you can't see right now easily on the screen is whether or not it's actually in focus. So I'm gonna go ahead and choose the settings here, and we're gonna go down to the bottom, and there's a macro focusing option. I've already missed it, there we go, focus peaking, and turn that on, so auto. You can change the color from red to yellow to blue, but we're just going with auto here, and go back. And what you're noticing here on the side is this has a little bit of red to it, right? And let's see what else is in the frame. I'm gonna put something else out there, right there, the case. You can see that little bit of pinkish red hue on there. See if we can get the exposure just right to be able to show that to you. A bit tough. But if I rotate this dial, you'll see that other things now out there have turned red. That means that is in focus, versus if I rotate in, it now shows this stuff in focus, that little red edging on there. That is focus peaking, so I can see what exactly is in focus, because you're essentially rotating between the flower, close-up stuff, and the little human, far-away stuff. My only criticism is I really wish GoPro would have put a little notch right there of whiteout, which I'm probably gonna do here shortly after this guide, so I can see which side I'm at just from a glance. So going back to the bike scenario, I shot this shot right here that you're seeing multiple times, because the first time I realized I actually had it focused far away, so that lost the entire point of the shot. And I wouldn't have done that if there had been a simple marker there that allows me to see what's going on. So probably just added a dot of whiteout so you can see which side you're on between these 2 points. So that is the macro lens mod, incredibly cool. I would recommend that. To undo it, you just simply kind of press in and then pull out like that. Next, we've got let's move this out of the way, UltraWide Lens Mod. This used to be called the Max Lens Mod, now it's just called the UltraWide Lens Mod. Physically speaking, it is virtually identical to the existing Max Lens Mod 2.0 and gives you ultra-wide 177 degree field of view. The only difference now is that it has basically a little sensor thing that basically tells it which lens mod is there. So again, line those two up, come on, and then just simply rotate until it snaps in place and take off the cover. Sorry, there we go. And now you can see ultra wide shows the top here, and it's a much wider field of view. And there's basically 3 notable things about the ultra wide lens mod. One, I guess 0, is just it's ultra wide, way wider than normal lens mod. 2 new settings here with this: Ultra Super View and Ultra Hyper View. And don't worry, if you got the Max Lens Mod 2.0, the previous one, that works with this camera here and works with these other settings right there. So here is side by side the difference between Ultra Super View and Ultra Hyper View riding. What you're essentially noticing with the Ultra Hyper View is even wider perspective. In some cases, like this riding shot here, it actually looks pretty cool. In other cases, it won't look cool, it'll look wobbly. I would generally not use the hyper view setting when you're hand holding a camera. I find it doesn't work out very well. Use it when you're locked and everything is really well centered. That's usually the best possible scenario. Also at the top though is the new 1:1 aspect ratio. Remember, with the other lens, you get a 8:7, so almost a full square, but not quite a full square. Here it is a full and complete square. So you can see that full square right there. Again, allowing you to crop into that however you see fit. I go in phases whether or not I use the ultra-wide lens mod or the max lens mod. Sometimes I'm like, yes, it's all I use for a few weeks, then I switch over to other stuff, but you do you. So There you go. Again, it's really best, I think, for those like chest-mounted shots. That's kind of my favorite scenario there. Then we have the ND filters. Generally speaking, the point of ND filters is to add motion blur, like you see right here, for high speed. So it kind of gives it just a faster moving perspective along the outer edge. Generally speaking, I have never recommended ND filters for most people because you have to get all the settings right. And knowing which settings to use and constantly changing light and scenarios, most people end up making the image worse. It's as simple as that. But GoPro has solved for that by making it automatically recognize exactly which ND filter you have and changing the settings for that. So for example, if we take out the ND8 right here, again, it's got a little blue tab there for aligning it. So you line up the two dots here. When I put this on, there we go. This immediately knows it's the ND8 up at the top there. You see that little ND filter icon and ND8. But you also see the arrow saying, hey, it's pointing down. This ND filter is not the right ND filter for this particular light. Now watch as I take this out and we put on the ND4 instead, so a less dark, less dense filter. Put it on, there we go, ND4, and now it says, yep, this is good. This is the right filter for this particular scene. And again, you also have ND16 and ND32. The whole package comes with all four of those together. Okay, let's put back on our regular lens here, clean things up. Okay, so let's talk about accessories that I use more or less like day to day. In particular, they're one, my favorite accessories, but two, which accessories you should pay for the GoPro Premium, and then which accessories you should just buy like generic stuff. So this right here, this is the floaty stick for the GoPro. This is like $3 on Amazon. This is one that you should just buy the generic one. GoPro has like a big old floaty stick with an orange cap on it, and it's great. It's stupid overpriced. It's stupid big more than anything else. It's just way bigger than I want. This is great. It floats, so if you drop your GoPro, it just floats to the surface, right? There we go, done. Meanwhile, on the other side, this is the GoPro dive case. You only need a dive case if you're diving. The camera itself is waterproof to roughly 10 meters, 33 feet or so. So there's no problems with that. I've never had any problems with GoPros and being waterproof because again, it really works quite well there. But when you go deeper than that, you need the dive case. And I would recommend, I don't even know if there is a third-party one, but dive case works great. It's what I used. Here's some diving shots from it just a couple weeks ago, in fact, with the Hero 13 Black. My next favorite accessory is actually this one right here, the little GoPro Shorty Stick. You can buy the GoPro one or knockoff ones online. They all work identically the same. I've used both of them, but I'm using it right here actually to hold up the phone, and I'll put some B-roll over to show you the Shorty Stick afterwards so I don't ruin this particular setup. Next, you've got clamp mounts. So I use a ton of these clamp mounts. I use both the GoPro ones and generic ones. This is the generic one. There's a GoPro one somewhere around here. Doesn't matter, they're identical across the board. The way this works is that you just simply slide in like this into it, then you lock it on whatever you want. I'm constantly using this stuff. They also typically have like a gooseneck mount on the top here. I'll put some B-roll on that as well. And that's awesome for kind of moving it around a little bit, but it's not great if it's like vibrating a lot, like if you're moving vehicle or something, it's gonna bounce around too much. But that's awesome. You've then got the GoPro 3-way. So this is effectively the big version of the Shorty, but it has a lot of flexibility. So it's got a big selfie stick that you can do this. It's got a ball joint at the top so you can kind of move it around as you see fit. But it also has a tripod mount at the bottom like that, so you can move it, you can extend it out. I use this all the time, so just constantly using this because it's just very, very flexible. I would say like if I had to choose only a couple things to take with me, it would be the 3-way, the Shorty, those are like, and probably the water thing, so I'm constantly open water swimming. This is the GoPro suction mount right there. This is one I would definitely spend money on the GoPro one or a high-end one from a non-GoPro company. Do not buy the cheap suction mounts on Amazon from third-party companies that are really cheap because they're crap and the GoPro is going to fall off the side of your car and then get squished by a semi-truck and cause like a, I don't know, fuel truck accident or something like that on the highway with something avoiding it. So just buy this one. I've used this one up to, I would say like 80, 90 miles an hour. I'm trying to think I've gone faster than that in the Autobahn, but with a GoPro mount on the outside, but no problems with this at all. If you're doing like airplane stuff, then use ones that are designed for airplanes. There's other stuff like that by companies that make airplane mounts for GoPros. GoPro chesty mount here. This is the newest version of this, I believe, and works really well. I use chest mounts primarily for mountain biking. I don't tend to mount my cameras on the bike itself moving forward because I don't find that really exciting because you miss the perspective of the handlebars and the rider. Just putting on the front of the bike is super boring versus a chest mount lets you be part of that image and it looks really, really cool. You can use, again, GoPro ones or third-party ones, doesn't really matter. We've got the GoPro Light mod and the GoPro Media mod and the GoPro Volta stick. This is all part of the basically creator bundle effectively. I think the Light mod is part of that. The Light mod is just really simple. It's just a light. There's no like connectivity between this and the GoPro itself. The Media mod though has one key feature. It allows you to plug in an external mic on one of these ports here. There we go, right there. You can plug in a 3.5mm mic. But you don't need to do that because there's also Bluetooth connectivity that I'll get into in just a second. Volta is essentially just a big ass battery bank. That's all it really is. And with a selfie stick, blend it together. So you mount your GoPro on the top here. You can rotate it around. And then down here is a USB-C port. But this plugs into your GoPro on the side. But you can also go ahead and charge this up. But you can use this for charging other accessories as well. For example, you can use the magnetic door latch with this whole thing and charge it that way too. And then you can control the camera from the buttons right there. I don't use this that often, very rarely. Mainly like when I'm hiking, sometimes I'll use this because it's just like a built-in battery bank and USB stick in one. So it's kind of like combining two things, but it's so-so. So beyond that, then we've got your Bluetooth mic stuff. So now we're gonna switch over to a different section here. I'm talking about Bluetooth mic stuff. I got a bunch of like debris from those mounts and whatnot there. With the GoPro, you can pair two Bluetooth mics. This can be AirPods or this can be the DJI Mic 2. Not the Mic 1, the Mic 2. The reason is the Mic 1 does not have Bluetooth in it. So to do that, you go into the camera, you power it up, you would swipe down, you go over, pair device, and then I'm gonna turn on the DJI Mic 2. Here we go. And then to go into Bluetooth pairing mode on the Mic 2, I'm gonna long press this for a second and to get it into the blue dots up there on the top right hand side. There we go, got blue up there. And then I hold this for a couple more seconds and it should go into the quick flashing mode. And there we go, DJI Mic. Boop, DJI Mic. Boop, DJI Mic. There we go, and now it is paired. And if I swipe down or up or whatever, you can see at the bottom, I've got the audio profile right there. It is as simple as that. Now, whether it be your AirPods or it be the DJI mic, when it comes to Bluetooth audio on the GoPro and really across the board, it's not amazing quality. It's just so quality. Wired mics via the Media mod are great. I do that sometimes. And you can actually use the DJI mic with the Media mod, mounting it on top the receiver side and then wire that in. Then the audio quality is perfect. But Bluetooth stuff isn't ideal. I don't find it amazing right here. This is like a backup type scenario more than anything else. I would instead recommend just recording to the DJI mic pod by just, having an offline save there and then syncing the audio later. But you can still do it in a pinch if you needed to for some reason. A good example being you want to mount the GoPro on the outside of the car where the audio is going to be useless anyways, and you want to sync the audio later on. This way you can have it at least have the right reference audio track for you. So last but not least, let's just briefly talk about a quick GoPro Quik app. Oh, look at that. A couple quick things on the GoPro app. So here is the GoPro app. I'm gonna screen record. So this is the GoPro app. It allows you to change settings or control your camera, etc. So I can go ahead and enable preview, and this will then connect to this via Wi-Fi. Now, a couple quick notes here. The GoPro turns on Wi-Fi only when you request it to. It's not on all the time. Bluetooth is on though all the time, and it'll stay on for up to 8 hours after you turn off the camera. That's useful if you were to go ahead and lose your camera somewhere. You can actually go into this and turn on the beeper for up to 8 hours after the camera turns off. As long as the battery is not entirely pulled, it goes into this low power state and is there taking up negligible amounts of battery. So let's say you lose your camera, choose settings to the top right hand side, go all the way down, and then you'll see there is a beeper here, locate camera right there. And it'll start beeping the camera. And now in this case, the camera is actually too close to do that. So it's like, hey, you're right next door. You don't need to beep me. But I've already used this a couple times now to find this camera. I dropped it while I was hiking, and this was incredible to be able to go ahead and do this. So just keep that in mind as a quick tip right there. Otherwise, you can see you can change all the settings that you could on the camera from the app itself. I can see the preview here in real time. There we go. I can change the modes at the bottom. All the settings are essentially here as well. Now, let's go back to some of the settings that are not as obvious though. One being in View Media, I'm going to choose a piece of media here. We're going to choose something that's somewhat interesting, vaguely interesting anyways. I'm going to go to one of these windmill shots right there. I'm going to open it up, and this is on the camera itself. Now, if I rotate this, I can see kind of a full view of it. And I'm going to go ahead and snip out a single frame of this. So what you can do is you can move along this entire thing. I want the frame with the windmill. So I go that way, and I turn back around again. We find where I turn back around again to get the exact frame with the windmill in there. And there. And I want that frame to use for social media, right? So I'm going to press the bottom left-hand button right there. That's the basically showing the image coming out of that. And this allows me to choose the exact frame that I want. So I'm like, you know what? I want that frame right there. That's the frame I want. Save photo. And now that saves it to the media in the GoPro app. Then from there, you have to export it out again to your camera roll. Again, remember I talked about earlier on how it's just way better to try to get the exact frame that you want. I'm shooting here at 60 frames per second, so that's twice as fast as burst mode on photo, and then the resolution, the quality of this is absolutely incredible as well. In addition, you can go ahead and you can download this entire video to your phone to go ahead and edit later on. I can also choose to take a snippet from it. I can create a clip I want, let's just say that little section I want from here to there, right? That's the only section I care about, that 9 seconds. Choose next. Do I want to save it to photos or save it to the GoPro app? I'm going to save it to my photos. And then it just takes that one little snippet as opposed to downloading the entire video. That's useful, again, if you've got like a 10-minute video that would take a while to download versus the 9 seconds that I actually care about for social media or whatever the case is. Go back and see that in the media library for the stuff that I downloaded sorted by the date. And here in that media library, you can see it's much higher resolution than it was in the past because previously it was streaming a low resolution copy from my camera to my phone, and then once you download it, it's high resolution. In that media library at the top, you'll see app, cloud, and phone. So this allows you to see stuff that's been saved to your local app, my entire GoPro cloud account. So you can see things that are synced right there into the cloud account. This is years and years of photos and videos in there because every single GoPro is uploaded to this account over the years, and it saves it there at its full resolution, full everything, so it's not like downgraded at all. And then phone is to see the stuff on your phone. Now, in the case of the phone bit, that does require a GoPro subscription to be able to see that, as does the cloud. That's also part of the GoPro subscription. I do appreciate the paid subscription purely for backing up all my stuff. You also get a moderate discount on some of the GoPro accessories, as well as you get a faster service if you kill your GoPro. Now, lastly, in the Studios option, you'll find your automatic edits. So it takes all the footage that you upload to the GoPro cloud and creates a little edit on it every single day. So I have no idea what this August 19th edit will look like. We're going to find out together here. I've never played this one, so give it a couple seconds to do this, and it's going to create that edit. So right now it's pretty boring. Sometimes it's pretty good. I'm still editing my entire day. And the thing is, sometimes these edits are great, sometimes they're a little boring. You can change the time to try to condense it down a little bit more, but it's still cool. Like, it's still consolidating my day. My problem is that I shoot a lot of reference footage for stuff that's not like a normal vacation person. So it's got like my jellyfish in there and things like that. Versus a normal person is gonna shoot the things that are actually interesting in the day. I'm shooting a lot of comparison footage and things along those lines. But I find if I'm doing like normal vacation mode stuff, the edits turn out really, really good versus sometimes they're like, yeah, not so good. In any case, there you go, a complete GoPro beginner's guide covering all the things I could possibly think. I've got my list here and I've gone through everything on my list that I want. So hopefully you found this interesting. I'm assuming at this point, if you got to this far in the video, you found it interesting. As always, if so, go ahead and whack that like button or subscribe. It really does help out the video quite a bit. Have a good one.